Imagine a world where death is not the end, but merely a transition into a commodity. A world where human remains, once sacred, are meticulously processed, repurposed, and sold for staggering sums. This isn't a dystopian novel or a horror film's darkest fantasy. This is a chilling glimpse into an industry that operates in the shadows, an industry where the line between reverence and exploitation blur irrevocably. To understand this macabre black market, we must first peel back centuries of human history, exploring our complicated relationship with the deceased. For millennia, cultures across the globe have revered bones, whether as sacred relics, objects of ancestor worship, or scientific curiosities. The fascination isn't new. Doctors in Renaissance Europe would pay handsomely for cadavers to study anatomy, often supplied by grave robbers operating under the cloak of night. Before refrigeration and before modern legal frameworks, this grisly trade laid a crude foundation. But the sheer scale, sophistication, and global reach of today's corpse economy dwarf anything that came before. We're no longer talking about a handful of medical students illicitly acquiring a single body for dissection. We're talking about an intricate, multi-million-dollar enterprise, a sprawling network that traffics in everything from teeth to entire skeletons, often without the consent of the deceased or their families. The demand for these morbid goods stems from diverse, sometimes legitimate, sometimes deeply disturbing sources. Medical institutions, artists, collectors, and even practitioners of fringe ideologies all contribute to a market that thrives on secrecy and desperation. The initial acquisition, the point where a human life transitions into a raw material, is often the most ethically dubious part of the entire operation. This is where the truly dark side of the trade begins. In places where law enforcement is weak, poverty is rampant, and the sanctity of human remains is easily overlooked or simply bought. But how do these bodies, once buried or cremated with dignity, end up in the hands of dealers? The journey is often circuitous and always chilling. The supply chain for human remains is a dark tapestry woven from desperation, corruption, and an insatiable demand. In poorer nations, particularly parts of Asia and Eastern Europe, the poverty of families is exploited. Imagine a scenario where a bereaved family, unable to afford a proper burial, is approached by an unscrupulous middleman offering a small sum for the body. The promise is that it will be used for scientific research. The reality is far more complex and often far more horrifying. Unidentified bodies from morgues, unethically acquired cadavers from medical schools, and even victims of crime can all find their way into this underground pipeline. Once acquired, the transformation begins. The raw material, the human body, undergoes various processes to prepare it for market. One of the primary and most disturbing methods is skeletal articulation. This involves carefully cleaning the bones, removing all flesh, and then reconstructing the skeleton for display. This highly specialized macabre craftsmanship can fetch tens of thousands of dollars for a complete, articulated human skeleton. These aren't just for anatomy classes anymore. They become morbid decorative pieces in private collections, props for films, or even tools for occult practices. Then there's plastination, a technique made famous by the controversial Body Worlds exhibitions. This process replaces bodily fluids with polymers, preserving tissues and organs in a surprisingly lifelike state. While some plastination is done legally for educational purposes, the techniques can be replicated and applied to illicitly obtained remains, creating what are essentially human statues that can be sold for astronomical prices. A plastinated human cadaver can command hundreds of thousands of dollars on the black market, a grotesque testament to the value placed on the preserved dead. Teeth, hair, skin, organs, almost every part of the human body has a dark market value. From the small-scale sale of individual teeth for jewelry to the large-scale trafficking of organs for illicit transplants, the exploitation is boundless. Even cremated remains can be forged and sold, preying on grieving families. The sheer breadth of this trade, the countless ways human remains are repurposed and sold, highlights a deeply unsettling truth about human greed and fascination with mortality. And the people facilitating this? They are often highly organized, operating across international borders, using encrypted communication and convoluted shipping routes to evade detection. They are not merely opportunists, they are sophisticated criminals operating a global industry. But what happens when this shadowy world is dragged into the light? Consider the story that unfolded in the late 2000s, when federal agents in the United States began to unravel a massive human body parts trafficking ring. This wasn't just about bones. This was about entire bodies, meticulously dissected and sold, piece by gruesome piece. The operation centered around a man who ran a seemingly legitimate tissue recovery business. On the surface, he was taking donations for scientific and medical research. Beneath that veneer, however, lay a horrifying truth. He was allegedly acquiring bodies, often from funeral homes, through deceptive practices. Families believed their loved ones' tissues were going to help save lives, contribute to scientific advancement, or provide income for their indigent loved ones. Instead, entire bodies, without proper consent, were allegedly being carved up in an unsanitary, clandestine lab, sometimes in a decaying warehouse, and then sold. The sheer scale was breathtaking. Skin was harvested for cosmetic procedures, bones for orthopedic implants, and tendons for reconstructive surgery. The tissue was then sold to unwitting biomedical companies, who in turn sold it to hospitals and doctors. The bodies were not properly screened for diseases, leading to potential health risks for recipients. Imagine the horror of learning that the tissue transplanted into your body, meant to heal you, came from an illegally acquired cadaver, processed in a dilapidated garage. The scandal rocked the medical community, exposing a terrifying vulnerability in the oversight of human tissue procurement. Investigators found evidence of corpses being dismembered with chainsaws, of vital records being falsified, and of desperate individuals being exploited. The ring operated for years, generating millions of dollars in illicit profits, all while desecrating the bodies of the deceased and betraying the trust of their families. It was a case that starkly illustrated the depths of depravity possible when profit is prioritized above all else, and the dead become nothing more than raw material. The reverberations of this case continue to be felt, pushing for stricter regulations and more transparent practices, but the underlying demand and the willingness of some to meet it through unethical means persists. To this day, the dark world of corpses and gold continues to operate, albeit more carefully. It serves as a stark reminder of the fragile boundary between honoring the dead and exploiting them. The legal framework surrounding human remains vary wildly from country to country, creating loopholes that traffickers are all too eager to exploit. Our collective unease with death, our desire to understand it, and our sometimes morbid curiosity about what lies beyond, all inadvertently fuel aspects of this market. The ethical questions are profound. Who owns the body after death? What is the true value of human remains? And at what point does scientific inquiry or artistic expression cross the line into desecration and exploitation? These are not easy answers, and for many, the very thought of this industry is deeply unsettling. The next time you see a human skeleton in a museum or hear about a body donation program, ponder for a moment the journey those remains might have taken. Because in the shadows, where the line between life and death blurs, a chilling economy thrives, sustained by the very remains we once held sacred. What else about our world is hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be uncovered? If you want to dive deeper into the chilling intersections of science, ethics, and hidden trades, our next video explores the bizarre and terrifying history of human taxidermy and its modern resurgence.